Morning, members. It is 11 o'clock, or just gone actually, so we better make a start. We are streaming live now, so and I'll explain why I'm here in a moment. First item we've got is apologies for absence. And
Apologies received from Councillor Dupre, substituted by Councillor Kane. Apologies received from Councillor Goldsack, substituted by Councillor Count. And apologies received from Councillor Dew.
Sorry, Michael. Yeah, I did see him on a Zoom call yesterday, so I knew he was coming. He said he was attending. Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm chairing the meeting because Councillor Dupre is sadly unwell, and I'm sure she'll be watching the live stream. So I wish her well, and hopefully she gets better soon. So item 2 then is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members? I'm seeing nothing, so move on. Item 3 is to approve the minutes of the previous meeting and then look at the action log. Are members happy with the minutes from the last meeting, which was on the 28th of November? Agreed. Okay, good. Thank you. And then moving on to the action log, I think there's only one item. Sorry, I'm just trying to find it on my system. From the last meeting in terms of budget scrutiny, and the question around, I'll read the question. The actual was the monitoring officer to clarify the voting arrangements at board regarding the mayoral precept, particularly in the event that the mayor was not present and was substituted by the deputy mayor, who was a member of a constituent council. And the answer from the monitoring officer, which is in your pack on page 14, is the voting arrangements for the mayor's budget requires 2/3 of the members to reject the budget. Otherwise, it passes automatically. 2/3 equates to 5 members. Therefore, unless 5 members veto the mayor's budget, it will automatically pass. The rules do not change regardless of whether Mayor Nick is present or not. The voting requirements remain the same. That's the answer we've had from the monitoring officer. So hopefully that deals with that question. To my agenda. And then item 4 is public questions. Are there any? There are no public questions. So item 5 is obviously the main part of the business for today, which is to discuss the budget and the medium-term financial plan consultation, and discuss the committee's response to the draft budget and MTFP. We have got officers online. We've got John certainly is on. I can see him from here. So can I hand over to John or whoever from your team is going to start first, John?
Yeah, it's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I'll just do a brief introduction. So you recall at the last Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which was on the 28th.
Hang on a moment. Sorry, John.
Oh,
John,
sorry.
could you just stop? We've got a issue with the volume. It's very low. So.
Oh, okay.
Okay, all right. If you just carry on talking, we'll hear you better. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So just recapping on where we were on the last meeting of the 28th of November. So Rob and I, as you'll recall, presented a paper on the draft budget and medium-term financial plan in advance of the discussion that went to board on the 30th of November, at which the draft was approved for consultation purposes. The paper that we talked about at the last meeting concentrated on the principles and the approach to the development of the budget, and highlighted a significant pressure on passenger transport, and obviously provided an opportunity for members to ask questions on the detail of the budget. And as you'll be aware, that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee is a named or specific consultee to the consultation, which is as set out in the Constitution. We are in the middle of the consultation at the moment. That runs until the end of this week, the 13th of January. And then the results of the consultation will then be taken to the board for further discussion and a final version of the budget, hopefully for approval at the end of the month. And there are two elements of that. There's the Mayor's specific budget, but also the wider combined authority budget. And both of those have slightly different approval routes. There's no specific paper attached to these papers for this item. But when the Overview and Scrutiny papers were published, it provided background to the MTFP and invited the consultees to take part in a survey. So that's the consultation, which is on the website. So the committee is invited to discuss the budget MTFP with a view to providing a committee response that we will then forward on to the board for consideration. So in terms of the consultation itself, it included reference to the 4 priority areas highlighted in the combined authority corporate strategy. So that's achieving good growth, increasing connectivity, ambitious skills and employment opportunities, and enabling resilient communities. And the consultation asked for views on those, and it highlighted elements of the budget that related to each of those areas. Also, the consultation document also invited comments about if there was anything else that people would expect to see or wanted to see in the budget, and also asked some specific questions relating to the highlighted £3.5 million pressure on supported bus services, whether people would be prepared to pay a precept to protect the current level of service, whether they would be prepared to pay for a better service, or if they would prefer a reduced service, what that might look like. So Rob and I are here, as well as other members of the executive team, to take any questions you might have to help with the discussion. But I'll stop there for now. Thank you, Chair.
Spencer. Yeah, thank you for that. In terms of what we're being asked to do today, I'll just mention this to members so we can get an idea of what we're actually trying to achieve, is discuss the committee's response to the draft budget and MTFP. And then during the discussion, please try to get agreement on each of the points that the committee wishes to make in their response. And we'll summarise those at the end. Anne and Joe will be picking up those points as we go through, and we'll summarise at the end to see if we can get an agreement on what we're going to put in as our response to the consultation. So if I can ask you, as John says, there are members of directorates online as well to answer any specific questions that you may have on directorate budgets. But if I can ask for members who want to ask any questions, I've got Councillor Hay.
Yes. Oh, right, fine. I'm glad you mentioned that we're here to discuss the committee's response to the draft budget and the medium-term financial plan. Just quite honestly, without the figures in front of me, I don't see how we can discuss it. That's the whole point. If you're going to discuss something, you need to know what's in it.
Was a link to on the paper. There was a link to the actual consultation. Is that what you're? I think there was a link from there then to the actual MTFP. Council account. So
Just on this point, Chairman, I too found this difficult. I've looked into it some more. There was a link to the consultation, and then there's a huge block saying read our medium-term financial plan. And when you click on that block, it is a high-level strategic view with a very slanted attitude to the MTFP, in my opinion, and there's no fine detail in it whatsoever. If you read further on, there is a minuscule link to the fine detail, which you don't click because you think you've already clicked the big link. It is very difficult to find, or it's not obvious. It's there, but it's almost, dare I say, disguised to limit engagement. In fact, I think the whole consultation exercise will probably have a low response because apart from ONS and the CPCA being very closely involved, I've not heard of anyone that's engaged with this or was aware of it.
Any other comments or questions at this stage? Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. I'm also a little bit bemused to try and hunt down this paperwork. If members have not been able to find it, I think the only thing I can suggest is we take a pause for a while so we get a chance to read it, and then we can come back with some logical sense, or otherwise we move the meeting to another time, because it's hardly going to help us if we can't actually consult because we haven't seen the document.
Well, the consultation does close on the 13th, I think it is. So we haven't got long. Sorry, did you indicate, Councillor Kane? No, you didn't. Sorry, no. It's Councillor Atkins then.
Thank you. So I've been looking at there's a 14-page kind of Word document PDF, which is what I assumed that our attention was supposed to be drawn to. But I agree if members, which has sort of further detail than is provided on the website. I think that is, perhaps the officers could clarify. I think that is the most granular level that's been provided. But perhaps if members have not had a chance to look at this, it might be worth taking 5 minutes for them to scan through that, because it is laid out in a committee paper fashion, which I think members might be more used to. But perhaps officers could confirm if that is the most detailed document available, and if so, whether that could be circulated immediately and a 5-minute pause taken so that members can look at it.
Yeah, so there are links within the consultation sort of micro site within the website. I think there may have been an issue with links to the detailed appendices, but those, if that is not working properly, then they can be found at the original discussion document, the draft document, which was in the Combined Authority Board papers, which I think is probably what the committee looked at the last meeting. So it might be worth if we could focus on that. Is it? Not sure if the officers in the room would be able to. Is that something that perhaps we can share on screen?
John, sharing some of those on screen will be, some of the figures are very, very small. Looking at, I've got them up on here on a laptop and they're not that big, so it'd be very difficult to read, I would have thought. Councillor Hassel. Oh, sorry, excuse me, it's Councillor Hassel. I had Councillor Robertson first. Sorry, I missed him. Sorry.
Oh, that's come on now. Yeah, I too had problems with this whole question of paperwork. I couldn't find very much at all in the information. I went back to the board meeting of the end of November and looked at the papers from there because I could not find anything on what we were directed to look at. I'm interested to see this 12-page document that has been referred to. Where is that on the website somewhere? And if not, can we? Is that what we? If we could look at that today, I think that'd be helpful. I found it very strange that quite a lot of the subject matter was built into the FAQ section of the what we were referred to. Details discussions about, or the options for things like the precept are in the FAQs, but that's a very strange place to find them, unless it's my age. Maybe that's where young people find these things nowadays. But I just found the whole document very difficult to deal with. So we do definitely need more information. But as I say, I did look at the budget that was presented to the board in November. However, that too has problems because it hasn't got the income side. It's got the expenditure, but no income. The breakdown of income is available on the pie charts with the consultation, but that's the only place I found it. So it's a bit of a mess generally.
On that, before I go to Councillor Hassel, that's where I went for I found the MTFP from last month's papers and looked at it. But I think part of our issues were last month, why we've ended up with a meeting today, is we didn't have a lot of detail. We felt we needed more detail. But Councillor Hassel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's just not acceptable. I have now just found one little hyperlink in the main text of the thing, which has, I think, driven me to the 14-page document. And we just need to make certain that information is made available. I don't know why this document couldn't have been issued to us as an email. It'd been far more effective.
Hey.
Forgive me. My understanding was at the last we weren't satisfied with the detail, but now we're being directed to the last board meeting, which is the same bills.
Sorry, Miss Scanlon.
We can hear the member there. Apologies.
I agree with all what's been said by the other councillors. This is totally confusing. I gave up in the end because it became a merry-go-round of trying to find information. I think the documents that are supposed to be available are confusing, ill-advised, and not clear enough for anyone to understand. If we can't understand them, can't find them, what are we supposed to do? Guess it?
I've got Edwina, who's the monitoring officer, wants to come in on. She's got her hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to offer to, well, not offer, suggest to the committee that perhaps you could consider short adjournment to have a look at the document, and Rob and John and myself and other officers online, and we could perhaps have discussions with you, and then you could resume after the adjournment. That was what I wanted to suggest to you, Chair, and the committee. Thank you.
I'm sensing. I'm sensing. Yeah, I'm sensing there's a feeling that we need to adjourn for 10 minutes or so for people to have a look at these documents. Is that a summation of everybody's feelings? In which case, we'll pause the live stream. Yeah. Did you want to come in, Councillor Count? Or?
I think I probably speak on behalf of everyone here to say that there is no way that we can do our job properly, and how disappointed we are with this. And just register, I believe on behalf of the committee, how disappointed we are. But I think it's the only way forward. I've had a look, and I'll be able to draw some people that I wish to speak to towards some areas. But, you know, with the appendices links not working as well, the summary document being 14 pages, where it assumes everything is set in stone except for the element of the bus, does not really give a fair scope or a fair amount of time for the ONS to do its job properly. I just wanted to put that on record. I'm hoping that the rest of the committee would support that.
Thank you for that. In which case, we take a 10-minute adjournment to look at these or longer if we need it. I'm seeing no dissent to that, so yeah. He didn't pick you up on the live stream last time, but because your mic wasn't on. But
Yeah, I, like Councillor Count, am very, very disappointed. And 10 minutes to me is just not long enough to really digest the figures and start asking questions like we should do. I mean, see, to me, this is a fiasco. Not to provide us with the figures that we're supposed to be discussing is a ridiculous situation.
well, let's adjourn now. So we're adjourned now, and take as long as we need. Okay, thank you. and press watching online. We are now back online, and I have a question from Councillor Hassel to John Alsop.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to ask John if he can run through the two tables in the document that we've just been through. The table showing firstly revenue and capital, and I'd just like him to kind of run through the years and perhaps go through the expectation around the precept. I feel that we might be missing a version of this table with the precept included, but it looks to me like we have a surplus every year. But does that include the proposed increases in cost of bus services? So a few questions there, but I'm sure you'll pick up those as you run through the tables, if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you. Just before we do start, it might be worth just sort of pointing out that obviously this discussion at this meeting was intended to go through the consultation response from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and there was an opportunity at the last meeting to go through the detail of the budget. And I think the papers were provided to members at that point. So apologies that the links didn't work for this one, and there has been some confusion, but that was our expectation. And it's probably worth pointing out that there has been quite a substantial public sort of putting out into the public domain in terms of a social media campaign, and this year actually we've had the last count about 230 responses, which is far more than we've had in previous consultation. So there, it's not that that people haven't had the opportunity to and not actually provided some responses to the consultation documentation. But to go back to your question about the two tables within the narrative document, and these set out, as you expect, the revenue, funding and expenditure on the top table. So it starts off with the expected starting point at the beginning of April 2023 on the top table, and that is divided up into sources of funding. So the top three rows show effectively the single pot of revenue funding that we receive, and that's made up of on the top line there. That's effectively the gain share revenue that we get on an annual basis. That's £8 million per annum, and that is part of our devolution deal, which runs for the next 25 years. So as you can see, in terms of the columns, we've got in-year income. The total across the organisation for 23-24 is expected to be of the order of 40 million, and each column after that within each of the years of the lifetime of the MTFP sets out the approved expenditure and also subject to approval expenditure. So for a large degree, the current, or this version of the medium-term financial plan, is effectively a rollover of the existing MTFP. It has been updated for a number of additional funding streams and related to expenditure. There has been a process of looking at the profile of some of the projects and programs across the MTFP lifestyle. So that profile has been updated. and also we've made some adjustments for known pressures. So we have increased staffing in costs in line with expected inflation over the next few years, and also we have made some adjustment to our capital reserve balances, which in order to provide us with more robust provision for expected or potential pressures in terms of inflation going forward. So, and on the left-hand side there, we've got the different funding streams. So there are, as I say, the gain share. There's the transport levy, which is a figure which is allocated or is recharged to the two highways agency, the combined, the Peterborough City Council and the County Council. The other main revenue source is the adult education budget, which again is a relatively recent devolved fund. And there are a number of other smaller pots of funds, which, as you can see, over the lifetime of the NTFP, gradually go down in value. The final column in each of the years provides an estimate on the balance at year end. So at the end of 23-24, in terms of revenue, we're expecting to have a single pot of just over £9 million, drops down to 7.2 million after 24-25, and at the end of the MTFP period, it gets down to 3.1 million. So as you can see, the over the lifetime of the MTFP, revenue resources gradually decline. That's more apparent in table 2, which shows the capital funding summary. Again, the top line there, the capital single pot, that actually includes the capital gain share that we receive on an annual basis. That is £12 million, and also in the current financial year and in previous years, that would have included the Transforming Cities Fund. As I say, we've made an adjustment to the contingency reserve to keep that at a higher level than has been previously, and other funding streams, as you can see, decline over the course of the MTFP period. The only one that is as a consistent is the highways capital grants, which is the maintenance grants, which again we receive directly from central government, and that is passported across again to the two highways agencies. In terms of the additional passenger travel pressure, this doesn't include those pressures for next year. We have in previous discussions we've talked about being able to contain those additional pressures in the current financial year, but going forward, the forecast is for next year and ongoing is there is going to be a pressure of approximately £3.5 million in terms of maintaining the current level of service. Again, at the last board, we highlighted that there are a number of options, and these are again which were raised in the consultation document. That there is obviously a potential to either to keep the levels of service at the existing levels, or to potentially increase levels of service, but obviously that would increase the ongoing pressure, or indeed to reduce the level of service to what is affordable, and those are the three of the options that were set out in the board report, together with a number of potential options for funding. Obviously, we will be ongoing looking to lobby central government for additional funds. There is it's a common issue and cause for concern across all of the mayoral combined authorities. Going forward, we really need to have a guaranteed future funding stream that we can rely on, especially given that the gain share funds that we receive are cash flat, so they will remain at £20 million in total across the lifetime of the devolution deal over 30 years. So whilst inflation is running at 9-10% at the moment, that will considerably eat into the real value of those funds going forward. There is also the potential to increase the transport levy. The budget that is before us today assumes a 2% increase in the transport levy. According to the rules for making increases to that levy, that is based on the RPI inflation index of the which is at the September prior to the beginning of the financial year. That RPI rate was 12.6%. But the budget, which is in draft form at the moment, assumes that that the difference between the 2% included at the 12.6% that we could increase the levy by will be picked up by the combined authority. But obviously that is an option that the board might want to look at again. There are potential. We have also been looking at savings within the revenue budget. This does include some staffing savings. There are some savings again as a result of the change in accommodation, and that the mayor's office is being co-located in Pathfinder House in Huntingdon. And there are, as you can see, there is albeit a reducing level of reserves. There is potential to look at that, but that would only provide a one-off short-term solution to the ongoing passenger pressure. Sorry, that was a bit of a long-winded response to your question, but happy to pick up any further questions on this.
I'm sure you'll want to come back on that, Councillor Hassel.
Yeah, thank you for that, and apologies. It sounds like we've been operating slightly in cross purposes, but in terms of the consultation on a personal level, I find it quite difficult to respond if I can't see how each of these. There's clearly a number of things that are, if you like, changing the model. One, whether we have a precept, whether we increase the transport levy, etc., etc. And without each of one of those, the figures for each one of those scenarios being presented to us, I'm sort of finding it quite difficult to help, really.
Did you want to come back on that, John? Or
yeah. So in terms of the options, and again, I think probably in the consultation it does talk about if there were to be a precept, and I've got the exact figures in front of me, but that in order to be able to cover a £3.5 million pressure, that would be the equivalent of about a £12 precept, which on a band D property per annum. So I don't know if that gives a flavour of the I think it works out at about £300,000, just under £300,000 per £1 of annual precept on a Band D property.
Thank you. I did see that, yeah, and it's I guess the question around that is also how is that going to be guaranteed? We've had many issues with Stagecoach and the like, so it's if it seems as though, and I think part of the scrutiny aspect is that it seems as though from what you're saying that the precept is the best option, but I think from a scrutiny perspective we need to be totally sure that that's the right way to go. That would be my opinion. But assuming it is, then I think some guarantees as to whether that money is going to be spent and we don't get hit by another Stagecoach type situation. What controls do we have over that precept? Because I think the worst case scenario for residents would be a situation where they're paying their £12 extra in precept and then just find that we experience a similar situation, perhaps in a different way, where the bus services stop and etc. etc.
Just to clarify, apologies, but I'm not suggesting that the precept is the way to go. It's just one of the options that the board will have when they come to discuss it at the board meeting later on in January. But yes, I mean, and again, the comments that you make are absolutely valid, and perhaps that could be form part of the response to the consultation.
Thank you, John, for that. I've got Councillor Kane wishes to ask a question or make a comment.
Oh yeah. Thank you. My concern is the buses. I'm very disappointed that there isn't already provision in the budget for at least maintaining the current service and preferably improving it. I don't see how the combined authority can meet any of its priorities if people can't rely on public transport to access education, GPs, work opportunities. I mean, take today, I looked up how I could get here by public transport. It would have taken 2.5 hours, so that's 5 hours round trip for a 2-hour meeting. I'd have had to use 2 different buses from 2 different providers, so that's 2 lots of tickets, and a train ticket. So it was quite a complex thing to work out. I have residents whose sixth formers can't access sixth form college, people who've had been threatened that they're going to lose their job because they can't reliably get to work. The buses are really, really key to you delivering your priorities. And yes, you've highlighted it in the paper, but I would like to see some really clear suggestions for how you would A, fund the 7 million you need to keep the current level, and B, fund further improvements to public transport. And also I'd like to see information on how you're progressing with franchising, which I see as the option for giving you the control to make sure that we can't have a repeat of what happened a few months ago with Stagecoach just pulling services. So I find it difficult to put a specific comment or question because there's a lack of information about what the options would be. But I do feel very strongly that 7 million to keep the current service should be in the core budget that finally gets approved, plus some additional funding to improve on those services.
Did you want to come back on that, John, or
just to clarify, so there is approximately £3.5 million within the existing budget. It's just that going forward, that the cost of maintaining the current level of services will go up, and the expectation is that will be of the order of 7 million, which is where the that 3.5 million pound pressure comes from. So there is some budget there. It's just going forward, it's not going to be enough for the present level of service, and that is obviously, as we've discussed before, there are a number of options that the board can take in terms of how it wants to combine the level of service with the funding that is available, and if it's not available, then how that funding can be potentially raised.
So if I can clarify on that, we've got 3.5 million costs in the expenditure in the budget at the moment for buses, but not the
That's
other
right.
3.5, because we similarly haven't got the income in there either.
That's right, yes.
Yeah. Councillor Kane, sorry, you want to come back? Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, it's kind of reassuring that there's at least 3.5 million in there, but as you said, it isn't enough. But also fundamentally, we can't be in a position where people don't know that their bus is going to be running in a few weeks' time when they're trying to decide how they're going to get to work, how they're going to get to college, how they're going to get to visit friends and family. We need a funding stream through these full 4 years and beyond, that gives reassurance that those bus services are going to run and are preferably going to improve year on year. And I admittedly, I'm a substitute, so I haven't read every single paper that this combined authority has looked at over the last year, but I can't find clear proposals for how that funding would be provided.
On that, John, or
Well, as I say, just to I think the narrative paper highlights that as as the fundamental issue. So it comes down to a number of potential solutions. One being additional funding from central government, lobbying, looking at savings. There are a number of revenue projects that are still subject to approval within the MTFP, but again, some of these will be one-off solutions. We can look at reserves, we can look at the transport levy, we can look at other forms of funding, and one of those is the precept. So there are a number of options, but they are kind of limited in terms of how we can potentially rely on them, and some of these will be I guess political decisions.
I've got a number of speakers. I'll go through them very quick to make sure I haven't missed anybody. I've got Councillor van der Weyer, then Councillor Hay, Councillor Coles, Councillor Atkins, Councillor Count. Okay, I'll allow that. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Right, thank you. As you know, at the last Combined Authority ONS meeting, we had a report on the bus review that's been going on now for 4.5 years, and we still seem no further forward. And now, I was led to believe at the last meeting that we were working on putting in a bid to central government for more funding. But I was also led to believe that this bid that we were planning on putting in was dependent on including congestion charges, and that without that we would fail to get any money from central government. This I believe to be totally untrue, because only recently another mayoral authority received funding and they did not include congestion charges. So I want to know where we're going forward with any bid to central government, particularly because in the past we have lost out on funding because we haven't been ambitious enough and we haven't ensured that any bid that we do put in is strong enough that it will attract funding.
I don't know if that's something that Tim might be able to come in on.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you've got Tim. Yeah, thank you.
Just in relation to that, so there's two parts to that. One is around the bus service improvement plan, which we are looking to put our second round of bus service improvement plan into government in May, which is following the bus strategy consultation that launches tomorrow. So we're looking to extract funding, as much funding as we can when it comes available with the bus service improvement plan. There's no funding available at this present time, but that we need to have that updated bus service improvement plan. We have been told as part of that we need to be, as feedback before, we need to be more ambitious, and that is part of why we've now got the bus strategy work. And then also with reference to the franchising that have been touched on by a number of members up to date, we are continuing to do work on the franchising, and there's funding within the budget for next year to progress that work. We are having a member workshop this week with leaders, etc., and TIC members, and this will be coming to ONS in due course around what type of franchising we wish to pursue. So there is definitely more work and around the franchising. And finally, with the local transport and connectivity plan, we are looking to finalise that in the next financial year, which will outlining our position on various transport strategy initiatives, and that ranges from fiscal measures all the way through to behavioural change measures. And the feedback we got from government related specifically on that is, if it's not included in our local transport and connectivity plan, when we come to do bids in due course over the next 12, 24, 36 months, if it's not included within that plan, then we will not be able to seek funding for those specific areas of projects. So I hope that answers members' questions.
Thank you, Tim, for that. Next, I've got Councillor van der Weyer next.
Thank you very much. Sticking with the buses, as Councillor Kane has been said so clearly, the problem we've currently got is partly one of the amount of money that we're putting into the bus funding, but also the certainty that users can have, and through that the certainty of I mean, it's sort of upstream from that, the certainty of funding that there is. So I think that's a we need to have a sort of establish a sort of base level of funding for buses, and then we can build on that with the more ambitious things in the longer term. So there's an urgent need to establish some reliable funding. I think on the basis of the information we've got, it's hard to really give any views or recommendations about how that can be achieved. It will be very interesting to see what the results of the consultation are, especially if there has been a decent level of response. But I think at this stage, I would certainly want us to be saying very clearly to the board that we do need to there's an urgency about finding some stability, security of funding for bus services at a sort of base level. I don't know what the process we have for establishing our response on the budget, but I certainly want to make that as a specific proposal that we include that in some form in what we say.
On that, basically, Annie's picking up all of the comments that have been made, and at the end we'll have a wash up of those and try to get an agreement of what we put as our response to the consultation. I've got Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Chair. 4 clicks and I'm up. That's marvellous. I've got a couple of questions. The first one, I was just interested to learn that there are 230 responses so far, which is the best we've had in a long time. With the population, that's about 0.02%. So to have any dependence on that level of consultation is somewhat concerning. So I'm interested to know what have we spent to make sure we've had an adequate consultation? And if we are getting such a low return, what's the value to the combined authority of that consultation? That's my first question, if I may.
Are you able to answer that, John, or somebody else?
Yes. Sorry, I'm just looking. I did have a kind of note from a comms team in terms of what's happened so far. So obviously we've got the website that has been up and running in terms of public relations. There was a notification went out at the beginning of December. There has been some coverage of it in local newspapers, and I think last Friday there was another announcement that went out to various sources. Also, it's been the consultation has been advertised and promoted on social media channels throughout December and into the new year, and also there's been an email campaign which has been sent out to all constituent councils, to parish councillors, and also with neighbourhood watch partners. So there has been quite a lot of activity in terms of trying to promote the consultation through a range of different methodologies. But if Edwina wants to come in on that.
If that's okay, Chair.
Thank you.
Can you?
Yes, Edwina.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the question that it is a statutory requirement for the combined authority to carry out consultation when there is going to be a mayoral precept, and it's also a constitutional requirement, so it's in our constitution. Because I think the question was there was something about the value to the authority, regardless of the value. The point I was trying to make is we are bound in law to carry out the consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. You had a second question, Andy. Yeah. Councillor Cole, sorry.
There we are. That's 9 clicks. I'm getting there. Thank you for the answer. Yeah, my argument, I suppose, was we know it's a statutory requirement. We're getting very low numbers, and we're spending a lot of money on consultations and doing a whole lot of process work, which seems to be having absolutely no value. So, waste of time to spend that amount of money when we're getting such a low return. I suppose if we have to fulfil the statutory requirement, then the statutory requirement is a link on a website and an email, and that's virtually cost neutral. But anyway, that's just a comment on it. It just seems it's such a disappointment to put all that effort in and to get such low numbers from our residents. But nevertheless, the other issue I have, I suppose, I was going through the budget documentation, and we haven't really covered, as far as I can see, and I'm sure you can correct me on this, John, is the inflationary pressures that we're facing and the impact of staff salary increases and so on. I know certainly with my own work on the budget here, that's been something of a challenge that I've worked on. It's not clear in the paperwork where that's catered for. I just wonder if you could go through that with me. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think it sets out what the assumptions going forward are. Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've included an inflationary increase on staffing costs of 5% for next year, and then thereafter 4% per annum, which is very much in line with other mayoral combined authorities, and actually it's fairly consistent with the other constituent councils as well.
The other question that was part of that question is the cost of accommodation, the operating costs of the authorities equally impacted. And again, I see just flat numbers in the paperwork, but perhaps that's changed since.
Yeah, so in terms of accommodation, that has reduced from previous years. Again, I think that's because of the move from Alconbury to our new premises at Pathfinder House, but also the merging together of or the bringing together of the mayoral office from Ely again to be co-located in Pathfinder House. So we should be we're forecasting a reduction in costs for this financial year, but ongoing. Yes, again, we're looking to make savings there.
Thank you very much. Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. I've got Councillor Atkins next.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question on process. In terms of how we kind of craft this, I'm going to throw a number of recommendations out that are included in our report. Obviously, I'd welcome any comments from members if they want to change those in any way. I mean, I'd also suggest that after this, perhaps the scrutiny officer's excellent notes be reviewed by perhaps a few members of this committee, sort of representing the different political parties, so that a kind of final version can be kind of wordsmithed, because I don't think we want to try and do that with however many of us there are, but perhaps perhaps three members of the committee, but we'll perhaps leave the details of that to be worked out. So the things I want to sort of throw into the mix, I will return to buses, fear not, but if I can zoom out slightly just to look at the budget as a whole, because I do think it's important. I feel this is not our opportunity to pick holes or look at particular projects, but this is our opportunity to look at the kind of the whole budget and funding in the round. Things that occur to me looking at the complete picture, it strikes me that compared to the equivalent points in previous years, a much higher proportion of the budget is now being allocated to approved expenditure, as opposed to stuff that hasn't been approved yet, or that is just sitting around waiting for a good idea to come along. I'm sure John will correct me if that's wrong, but my sense is that that particularly we have to remember this is an entity set up to deliver projects. So I think the committee could welcome the kind of what that means for delivery, i.e. that, if more of the budget is already approved expenditure, then there's more chance of that money being spent to help the residents that we represent. So it suggests to me that over the last year, the kind of project management, project approval has picked up in pace, and that this authority can get on and deliver the things it wants to deliver. So that's something I would like to welcome and have reflected in our comments if there are no objections. Looking at the capital side of things, I'd also welcome looking at the capital programme as a whole. I would say there's now a greater diversity of where that capital is being allocated. I think in previous years, the sort of the vast majority has gone on very large kind of road upgrades, which kind of, I don't want to kind of go over old decisions. Those may well have been welcome and necessary, but I think looking forward, it's interesting to see that it's now much more diverse. And while there is still money going on required road upgrades, there's also more going on active travel, alternative forms of travel, and other environmental projects. And again, I would like to welcome that increased kind of scope of what the capital programme is being used for. And I think that will mean that the combined authority will help a wider range of residents. So I'd like to welcome that as well. I have one question specifically on the capital side, and then I'll return to buses. So in the subject to approval, there is still sort of some 17 million subject to approval on the capital side, and quite a lot of that is the Wisbech rail station, and then a number of other smaller projects. I wonder, John Alsop, if you can give us a sense. Do you have any concerns about slippages about any of those major capital projects, either those that are subject to approval or already approved, that means that we won't actually spend this money as expeditedly as set out in the papers?
Okay. Thank you for that. I'll answer those in order. So to start off with, it was talking about a higher proportion of budget being approved against subject to approval. I think that's partly as a result of traditionally our funding is in advance. We, at the end of the last financial year, we went through this process before. A large amount of our available headroom in terms of available expenditure resourcing was earmarked to a number of different areas, including skills, economic growth, and also in terms of the recommendations of the Climate Commission. And a lot of those were, as earmarked, they went into the MTFP as subject to approval, which meant that they would need to come back to board for approval with a business case before they could be drawn down upon. So that effectively has kind of moved on. So we'd expect that over the course of the last year, a number of those papers have come to board, and those have meant that the subject to approval elements have moved into kind of delivery mode and approved budget. It does also highlight the fact that a number of our funding streams are coming to an end, so we have less in order to allocate, able to allocate to new initiatives, which would start in terms of the program life cycle as being subject to approval. So I guess there's a reason for that shift towards approved away from subject to approval. And again, in terms of the greater diversity of where the capital allocation is, second question, and previously had been large upgrades, for example, in transport. And that might be a reflection on the use of our Transforming Cities Fund. You'll be aware of the last few years, we've had about £95 million worth of Transforming Cities Fund, which has been predominantly used for transport-related projects. That has a lifetime, so it needed to have been committed and spent by a certain period of time. So a lot of those projects have now been delivered or have very much been in delivery. As we approached the deadline for spending that money, then we may have been a bit more flexible in terms of what we use them for. So perhaps projects with a shorter timeline, which might include some more active travel type projects. In terms of the capital program and the threat of slippage, it has been a concern of ours over the last couple of years. It's not uncommon across local authorities, but we are for a lot of our programs and projects, we do rely on our delivery partners, including some of the constituent councils, in order to be able to make progress on some of these programs. We are conscious of potential issues, and as a result of that, we have commissioned our internal auditors to do a review on the capital programme to highlight potential slippage and the causes for that. So yes, we are concerned about it, but we are actively trying to understand what the issues are and how we can deal with them.
That, John, do you want to come back?
Yes, thank you. So I think also in our recommendations, then, just following on from what John Alsop was saying, I think we should recommend that the board keep a particularly close eye on the risk of slippage in the capital projects, and reviews the work of the internal audit team, probably via the audit and governance committee, when that comes forward, because I do think that's something worthy of our attention as a combined authority to minimise that. On the buses, to return to what seems to perhaps be the kind of central kind of flashpoint in this particular consultation, my sense is that A, it's not our job, and B, there would not be consensus on this committee to try and recommend a particular funding source for the buses in the future. Where I think it is important for us to have a voice is on the expenditure side. Specifically, I think it very unlikely that the combined authority would take the view to kind of completely withdraw the support that it's currently providing and allow the bus service to collapse to what it looked like. I think we will all remember that period in September, October, where it looked like those bus services were going to collapse and the pressures that we were under from our local residents to sort that out. What I think we need to avoid is spending, let's call it 3.5 million every 6 months at a minimum, to only kind of commit to that on a kind of 6 monthly basis is very inefficient and will not deliver for our residents, because there won't be any certainty for them to kind of organise or plan their lives, and there won't be any certainty for the bus operators to invest in the service, recruit drivers, etc. So it seems to me that rather than spending the money in kind of 6 monthly chunks, the combined authority should, and I would like this committee to call for the combined authority to commit to spending at least the current level of support on buses for a period of 2 years. So for the following 2 municipal years. So call it 14 million over 2 years, I think, by my sums, and perhaps plus some inflation, something of that order. I think if we don't do that, there's a risk that that's the amount of money that we end up spending anyway, but just in drips and drabs, and it doesn't have the full effect that it could have. I mean, if committee members feel differently or they want to put it differently, I'm open to other suggestions. But I think in terms of this committee having an impact as part of this consultation, I think a really clear, simple call to action on this particular point, that 2 years worth of funding for at least the current level of service, and more if it can be found. I certainly don't want to rule that out, but for at least the current level of support should be found. And I think we leave it for the board and the combined authority to determine the appropriate level of funding to provide that when they've got the kind of full figures. I don't think I particularly need a response from officers on that, but I would be interested to hear if any members have strong feelings on that. Thank you.
Councillor Atkins, I think we'll try and pick that up, unless somebody's got a burning comment on it, and try and pick that up at the wash-up. But I've got, in terms of speakers, I've got Councillor Count next, then Councillor Smith, then Councillor Robertson, are the 3 people, and then now Councillor Kane.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, but most of mine is commentary on what I managed to find in the paperwork. So the first question is, where do I find the breakdown of the reserves table, John?
I think there is some detail in those tables, as we discussed earlier on. So we have the earmarked reserves on. If we look at table 1, so we've got the revenue reserve.
Yeah, where is the breakdown of the earmarked reserves, John? Where's the table of reserves? What composes the reserves?
Oh, okay. Yeah, we haven't got that in the post. We can provide that separately to you if that would help.
I'd certainly suggest that goes to the board, and it's disappointing that it's not made available to us. I'd be particularly interested in what's actually in there. The second question I've got is one that I'm not sure of the answer, and perhaps you help. But the original bus subsidy amount was transferred from the county council. Was that or was that not part of the integrated transport block, and that's where the money originally came from, and that's where it continues to come from until a new funding stream comes into effect? Or am I wrong on that? I'm not really sure.
I'm not sure. I don't know if colleagues around Rob or Tim might be able to.
Shall I put it another way? If the integrated transport block was changed, as you was indicating earlier, that could be used on bus subsidies. Should I put it that way?
If I can come back on that. The integrated transport block and the other highways capital grants are capital in nature, so we wouldn't be allowed to spend them on supporting bus services, which is revenue expenditure.
You're saying the integrated transport block is wholly capital?
I will double check, but that is my understanding.
I thought that was the highways maintenance grant.
Yes.
Okay, so I go back to the revenue one, the integrated transport block. Well, come back on that one, or at least go back to the board on that one. I don't need the answer today. All right. If I may move on to comments then, Chair. So the first thing I'd like to make the group aware of is that Cambridge City Council is currently consulting on removing bus subsidies from 3 city bus services from 24-25. The rationale behind that is they believe the GCP, who have £40 million a year and the mayoral authority has 20 million a year, plan to spend 50 million a year on bus subsidies from that date. If Cambridge City Council can do this, why is the option for the CPCA not progressing this for the buses in the GCP area so that the burden can be shared between the authorities, particularly as the GCP has twice as much money as the mayor? So that's just one thing. In respect of the ability to charge for a congestion charge or any kind of precept of that, that's already in the existing transport strategy. So this doesn't pose a risk to government bids, and I don't believe that government has not asked for that to be immediately implemented in order to secure a successful bid, but they do ask that it's actually in the actual transport strategy documents. That's not a risk. I'd like to then move on to the elements of the way the consultation was handled. And secondly, like Councillor Atkins, perhaps pose some responses to both elements. Firstly, with regarding the advertising, that was a rather long list, and thank you for getting that list out, Councillor Hassel. But I don't think that there was a lot of expenditure. Everything that was mentioned was a social media event or a press release through the comms team. And I think, what we're looking at here, a response rate of 230 odd people so far when the population is closing on 1 million. As we heard from the monitoring officer, it was a necessary statutory duty, and it has purely been performed, in my opinion, as a tick box exercise, not as a genuine effort to engage with the public. If there was a genuine effort to engage with the public at this particular time, how many responses do you think you would have got if you actually put a press release out saying that the mayor wants to introduce a brand new tax on the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough? Because I believe you get more than 230 responses, but most people I've engaged with have no idea that this is what is actually on the table at the moment. In terms of the consultation itself, I found the opening to that, the draft vision and finances received of the £82.8 million for next year were well laid out with pictographics and instruments. However, as we've already heard, the link to the draft budget and medium strategy was set out in a very difficult way. And when we did move into that sort of area, it was set out as council papers. This is not a way to really easily engage with the public. The original opening pictographs, the original opening statements, that would have been good to continue that kind of simpler information and pie charts for the consultation. Moving on to the consultation, getting a history lesson of where we've come from, where we need to go, what the consultation processes are, that is just time consuming. It's very boring for residents and they give up and leave. What we need to really concentrate on are vision, strategies, and the prioritisation of spending. There was little in the consultation to deal with the prioritisation of spending. It was all about the original questions were, tell us how much you'd like to do stuff on climate strategy. Tell us how much you'd like to do about buses. Tell us how much you'd like to do about adult skills. So, of course, for all of them, you go, I strongly support all of this. But it actually doesn't tell you that there's a limited pot and gives you options of how to balance your decisions and your changes one against the year. And what's really quite irritating is it then moves into a whole arena and concentrates wholly on the gap in the bus service provision. There's £82.8 million available next year and a £3.5 million gap in provision. And the only questions on that was, would you like to see services cut or would you like a precept? And when it talks about services, it doesn't say there are other opportunities in that £82.8 million. In fact, the tables in front of us have a £19 million revenue surplus at the end of year one. So those things could mislead people into responding positively to the mayor's proposed precept. Another thing that's not clear, and it's came out in this room today, the vast majority of bus services do not require subsidy. They are actually run on a commercial basis. Without that level of understanding, people who say, I don't want my buses to go and vote for a precept or a bus subsidy of some sort, believe that they are protecting somehow the bus that arrives their front door, whereas the vast majority of them, or in their neighbourhood, vast majority of them are protected by the fact of consumer demand. So it's very misleading when you say we need £3.5 million more, if not, your bus service is at risk. On the bus levy, question 3 was basically a maths quiz. There was a range of precepts saying that there will be a £300,000 increase for every £1 you raise. There should have been a clear indication of what that meant on a Band D household to retain current services. You had to get your calculator and pen out. I'm glad one of the earlier councillors actually elicited a response from John that it's just under £12. That's the same answer I got. But the actual range of options of other combined authorities put in front of us was £10 to £30, and there was no consultation element on what the Mayor's proposed precept might look like. Do you think £30 is too much, too little? That would actually deliver an improvement. Do you think I'd be going too far at £50? We have no idea of how people should answer compared to that. To sum up, I'd like the response to contain 2 themes, and I'm quite willing for the political people to have 3 representatives and narrow this down from all of the valuable comments that are coming in from everybody as to what they would like to go forward. I'm not here to say what the response should be. I'm only here to add a contribution. I think if I wasn't a substitute and just received notice yesterday, I might have perhaps had time to give some more detail. But the 2 themes, one is on the nature of the consultation. I would say that the lack of awareness, particularly considering a brand new mayoral tax was proposed, needs looking at. I'd like it to improve the readability and reduce the unnecessary content. I'd like the future consultations concentrate more on consulting on the strategy, the vision, and the prioritisation of finances. I'd like it to provide material and ask questions, and we know it didn't provide enough material, to ask questions to make choices and understand implications, not just say, what would you like to happen? Because you just say yes to everything. And I'd like to comment on the manner in which the consultation distorts the responses by limiting the options available to arrive at a bus subsidy towards accepting the Mayor's precept. So those are my thoughts on the actual consultation. And on the content of the consultation, I would personally reject the necessity to increase reserves. This is an organisation that delivers projects and then ring-fence things like the adult education budget. It's not very open to flexibility in service delivery because it really doesn't deliver that grand degree of services. And there is £19 million left at the end of year 1, which I've already commented on. So I don't see the necessity to increase reserves. I did want to break down the reserves table because one of the things I wanted to look for was the contingency for employment claims, which I believe are eye-watering, but I don't have information and it's not in front of me. The second thing I'd like is there's a complete element that's missing for me. One of the key jobs of the CPCA, as far as I'm concerned, is to land more and more and more funding from government. It is the conduit for all the bids from all the authorities go in, and it doesn't rate a separate line. So I'd like the Combined Authority Board and the Mayor to increase the vision of this being a conduit for trying to target the government for receiving funding, and actually to explore how you might put some finance into that to make it more successful. It's not been as successful as we would have liked. And lastly, I'd like sorry, not lastly, there's a couple more. The board needs far better information to explore all the options to deal with subsidised buses. And one of the things that we heard from Councillor, sorry, I can't remember the name, more detail on the franchising and the gap there. The last estimate we had of excess profits that I was aware of due to the geographical monopoly in this area that a franchise might help deal with was about £15 million a year. Now, I don't know if that's correct or not, it was an estimate, but if that's anywhere near true, that would remove the need for a precept and actually help out a lot with the subsidies if that could be move forward faster. So thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry I went on a little bit, but those are things that I managed to eke out.
Thank you, Councillor Count. We'll obviously pick those points up. Councillors, I'm conscious of time, and Councillor Smith, you're next.
I think range 6. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm pleased to see the strategic objectives. I think the next step is to see the baselines and the targets against these objectives. I want to see the interrelationships and where we can demonstrate that we're adding extra value from the spending as a whole rather than as a series of unrelated projects. And then I think we'll be able to demonstrate we're adding value to the funding that's being delivered to the combined authority via all these different government funding sources. I think the other issue that I think needs to be drawn to the attention of the board, and this is the purpose of this meeting there this morning, isn't it, to feedback to the board, is that we must not overlook the power of lobbying and the power to convene, and that we should be seeing the accounting mechanisms which reflect the impact on social inequalities and the environment in everything that the combined authority does, because they fit so strongly with the key objectives and the things that will make a difference to the people's lives and life opportunities, life chances. And so that brings me to buses. And I've heard a very well articulated case for buses from Councillor Kane and from Councillor Hay. And I can only support and endorse everything that they have said. It's unconscionable. There are young people in places like market towns like Chatteris and the Fens that can't access a sixth form college education because of the lack of a bus service. And it isn't, and I think there's a consensus in this room, chairs posed feedback to the board that this is something that absolutely has to be done. I agree that what we should be doing in respect of public transport funding is demonstrating to government that not only do we have a strategy and a coherent case for additional funding, but that we are doing everything that we can to solve the problem ourselves. And if we don't do that, then I think we'll have a diminished case for attracting funding from government. So it looks to me like a package of initiatives and measures to put in place this continuation of the 7 million additional funding that's required. And I strongly support Councillor Count's remarks in respect of franchising that needs to be brought forward as soon as possible. And that yields savings and we tackle monopolistic profits, then that's a very good thing to try and focus on. So I wish to endorse then Councillor Atkins' proposition that we get together cross-party to put forward, say, a coherent response to the budget, the draft budget, and send that to the board.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Smith. I've got Councillor Robertson next.
Only 3. Thank you. I'd like to endorse what has just been said by my colleague, Councillor Smith. And also, I felt the analysis provided by Councillor Atkins earlier was very effective, very precise on the way the budget is and the work is being carried out and being put forward. I think there's quite a lot of consensus here on the buses, particularly. It's clear that we were all rather shocked by the way the Stagecoach behaved in September and October. We need to make sure that doesn't happen again, and franchising is probably, well, it looks as though this is pretty much the answer to it, to bring them to account and to make them extract from the whole process some of these excess profits which have been alluded to. I'm going to make some comments on the options for raising additional money. Now, we talked last time about a levy, and of course there is already an existing levy, which is the money which is passed over from Peterborough and from the county when the combined authority was set up, presumably. That budget for buses was handed over and is the levy. There's no point in the board considering putting a further levy on without warning. Those authorities have no means of finding additional income to pay such a levy, and it is not a good exercise at all, in my view. And I think that would be understood and might as well be stated. Another option is to go to the central government. Well, the central government has already said they're expecting to see us raise money locally. So to try and push that one is not going to be effective with this government anyway. The idea of a corporation of a further levy on the rates is also was discussed last time and put aside because it does need time to build up into and to see if it's appropriate. Savings, yes, we can always look for savings, and I hope the authority is doing so. It does seem to be, and but that's not something for the immediate. That's for the longer term. So the idea of a precept does come back to that really. One thing, well, I think the precept needs to be recognised that it's got to find the 3.5 million, which is essential. If there's any further possibility of the stagecoach and other bus companies reneging on their obligations, moral if not contractual, then I think that the board needs to consider whether 3.5 million is going to be adequate. That needs to be looked into, I feel. One last comment. Councillor Count mentioned that the City Council was no longer going to fund some bus services. There was a small budget, I think, of just over 100,000 we're talking about. This is not very much money. And one of the services that were being funded actually had been discontinued. So there's no point in trying to put money into something that doesn't exist. So I think that's misleading and a red herring to consider that's a real problem for us. It's not. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Robertson, I've got Councillor Kane.
Thank you. I want to support the proposal that Councillor Atkins made, but I also have a further question for officers. The housing capital budget is going to be fully spent over the next 2 years. So what is the combined authority's role going to be going forward if it has no money to help support the provision of affordable housing?
Is somebody able to answer that, John? Or
well, we haven't got a member of that team, but yes, you're right. The funding that we did have when the combined authority was first set up has been allocated, and we will be looking, as you probably be aware, there is a restructure at the at tier 2 level, and there will be a new role for a director of place, which will be taking on aspects of housing going forward. So those plans will be in development. I don't think the role of the combined authority in affordable housing has gone away. We just need to understand what that is and what the funding going forward may look like. So I think it's very much in the development of plans going forward.
thank you. I'm seeing no further hands, so I think we've sort of exhausted the debate and the comments. So we've had various suggestions in terms of how we do this, because obviously rather than, I know Councillor Robertson and Smith did tell me they had to leave by 12:30, so they stayed on for an extra 15 minutes after that. But rather than 11 of us try to, do you want to go through is it worthwhile you reading the salient points out, Anne?
I can read through the ones I have listed, and then we can also send those round by email I think it's been suggested a cross-party.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure we've captured every point. That's all. Yeah.
I can.
It may be worth if you read them out. Then if anybody's got the point that they feel they've raised but it hasn't been picked up, then add it. But I think equally we send those round and we try to get. Obviously, I'll talk to Councillor Dupre after the meeting, and we can try and get a cross party consensus on a response, because it's got to be in by Friday.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So the first one, if a precept is adopted as the best option to meet the funding gap, what guarantees do we have on how this is spent? Number 2, there is an urgent need to establish a reliable, secure future funding source for the buses. We can look at franchising in the long run, but are there any immediate pots that can be raided to safeguard buses? The Combined Authority Board should commit to spending at least the current level of support for the next 2 years, which could equate to £14 million, to provide the certainty needed to residents. Whole budget and funding, it strikes that the high proportion of budget is currently being allocated to approved expenditure rather than projects waiting for approval, and this is welcomed for what this means for delivery. There is more chance of that money being spent. Project management has therefore picked up pace, and the committee welcomes this. In regards to capital, there is greater diversity of where this is being allocated. Rather than very large road upgrades, which has been the case in the past, there is now more focus on active travel and other alternative forms of travel and environmental projects, which will help a wider range of residents for the area. In regards to the nature of the consultation, it's felt that there was a lack of awareness, especially in considering the precept, that in future there should be more concentration on the consultation, focusing on the strategy and provision of finances. More material should be provided to ask questions and for residents to make choices. Query on the content in regards to the necessity to increase reserves, and that a breakdown of reserves should be provided to the board, and that there is an element missing within the consultation in regards to the role of the Combined Authority is to land more funding from central government, and that the CA Board should increase the vision of the Combined Authority as a conduit to receive funding, and should consider how we put more funding into this area. That's what I have down. I don't know if Joe has any. Joe, you'll make Mike.
Sorry, I had one other thing. There was a further recommendation that the board take a particular close eye on slippage rates. That Councillor Atkins.
I've got Councillor Count.
Thank you, Chair. The first one is just a matter of clarification. The improvement to the consultation I said was primarily on strategy, vision, and prioritisation of finances. So you can choose one thing, but that means you can't choose another. That prioritisation, I think you got that down as provision. That was for clarification. On the other one, I'd just like to make a comment on the request that we continue with the current level of support. My proposal adjusted that for the board to have more information in front of them. The reason I say that is, if I was to tell people, I don't have the document in front of me, but if I was to ask people, how much would you subsidise a bus service at? If I said, £10 per trip, you might say it's okay. I'd find that higher than a taxi. If you said 20, you might find that okay. If you said 30, 40, where would you stop? There are probably some bus services on that list at levels that you would stop at, and you would say, why don't we get a chauffeur-driven limousine? Right. So that's what I mean by adding more information for the board to make those decisions. Now, whether that comes in at the current level or higher or lower, I have no idea. But that is the element about more information. There are also the options about, so if we take quite a subsidised service, which people think I'm against, I'm not against the ting. All right. I'm actually like the idea, but there's a level of subsidy for that that's quite high. But it's certainly lower than some of the subsidised services, which are in those staggering figures. And therefore, there might be an element of revising the services and coming at a different subsidy level to what's going on at the moment by changing it to things that are expensive, like the ting, but it might be better that's what's on offer. But the main thing I would say about this is, it's an unfair bus subsidy system at the moment. There are areas there are towns that can't send their children to school, not little villages or hamlets. There are towns that don't have a 7-day service, and there are hamlets that do. Right? Until you actually examine who you should be subsidising and stop reacting every time there is a threat under service, the mayor's job is strategic, and he needs to set out strategic vision that people should expect this level of service dependent on where they live. You know, access to healthcare, access to schools, etc. And without that vision, we just carry on throwing money in a very scattered way, and therefore no money will ever be enough money. There has to be, what is it we want to provide, and then we find the finance, or we match that with the finance we've got. So I say that we should carry on subsidising buses. I don't know where the money's coming from, but I'm not in favour of putting an amount on it until somebody's done some decent work to explain that. So just giving my opinion, but I'm going to leave it to the three groups. One further comment, if I may. You just said, Chair, that you're going to speak to the chair, your acting chair, Councillor Lorna Dupre, to roll these comments together. It seems to me that you need to be speaking to the other people that are at the meeting and not somebody who wasn't. Thank you.
I've got Councillor van der Weyer, then Councillor Kane.
Yes, thank you. Just following on from what Councillor Camp was saying. I mean, I would broadly agree that we don't want to be telling the combined authority to be maintaining this bus or that bus. It's not our place to be getting to that level of detail. But at the same time, I think there's an important message that we need to be, and that it is a strategic question. While while we're waiting for the sort of a more robust scheme of managing and financing the buses to come through, we need to be largely maintaining the levels of service, not allowing that the current services we have to dwindle away. And it's that somehow that we need to get across. It's not if you spend £1 less than you're currently spending, we disapprove. I'm not talking about that level of precision, but it's an overall message that I think is personally think is really important to convey. I mean, notwithstanding the us not wanting to micromanage the bus services.
Thank you, Councillor Kane.
I was going to say something similar to what's just been said. We need the 2 years guarantee of funding so people know where they stand. We also absolutely need the combined authority to come up with a longer term plan, which I'm sure will include franchising to provide a much higher level of public transport than we currently have. But at least for the next 2 years, people need to know that they're going to have the level of service that they currently have.
Just trying to. I think there's various comments here, and obviously there's comments around the. Certainly, one thing I think we need to take away is for maybe future meetings or before next year is obviously looking at the consultation process to put our two penneth into it, so to speak, in terms of making sure we're happy with the process, because obviously the comments made by members at for the first half an hour of the meeting, I think we don't want that to happen again. Councillor Miscannon.
Live. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, on the consultation line, with the appallingly low response that has been achieved, I think the combined authority should look at the methodology of a consultation, which apparently yes, it's statutory, we've done it, but it's got no results. I think they need to look at the methodology that they're using to improve it so that they get a more factual consultation responses from the public, which at the moment are quite appalling.
Ms. Cannon, I've got Councillor Coles, then Councillor Harvey.
Jen, it's on that point, actually. I was just going to illustrate our budget consultation in Peterborough. We spent £5,000 on an interactive thing. which gave us twice the number of consultations over 2 days, simply because we engaged more effectively and we had a tool that was much more engaging with a member of the public who probably doesn't understand these sheets of numbers. And it's disappointing that insufficient funding has been put in place to make sure that we can promote this more effectively, maybe even to be quite challenging in what we say or provocative in what we say to encourage people to participate. I think it's such an important consultation to get right that maybe we could recommend looking at spending a significant amount of money, which is, well, £5,000 isn't, let's be honest, to produce that sort of consultation device. Thank you.
Councillor Coles. I've got Councillor Harvey.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'd just like to support what Councillor Count and that's okay. I've got mine. Have really said in terms of it's very important, I think, for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough to have something that's credible in terms of a public transport system, and that means not only does it need to have a sort of geographic scope, but also it needs to have the sort of temporal certainty, if you like, because, and I think Councillor Kane was right, that really underpins all the other things that the combined authority trying to do, and that would include inward investment, because if we didn't have some sort of credible transport system, we'd sort of become a bit of a basket case, I would say, as a region, because it's a sort of matter of civic, well, maybe I don't think we'd go as far as saying we're sort of, well, eventually, I suppose, civic pride if our ambitions were realised. But I think it would be a matter of civic embarrassment if we didn't have some kind of functioning bus service. So I do think that, I mean, to have something that you might use, even if you're a habitual car user, everyone has a situation where, you need to get to a hospital, or you can't drive your car because you can't legally do that in that situation, or your car's broken down. I mean, the fact that there is a backup system there does have a tangible value, and therefore, I mean, I would support the idea of this being partly funded by a levy, because I think that's a key part of having a sort of civilized Cambridgeshire. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Obviously, trying to finalise this, if we try and get a cross-party consensus of who, so there's obviously 3 parties here. We've only got 1 Labour member left in here now, but is there somebody from the Lib Dems who wants to, Liberal Democrats who wants to be involved, and I'll join it from the Conservative side, and initially we tried to get some sort of consensus in the next.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Dupre, who's been joining us on the live stream, has indicated she's willing to work with yourself and any other member to kind of construct the kind of final response that goes to the board. And I think that would be appropriate given her experience and expertise.
Chair, that seems somewhat inappropriate to me. There's no way that you get the level of passion and intensity of comments, or in fact, you cannot hear every single comment over the live stream. Councillor Dupre couldn't be here today. She's not here. Somebody who is here should be the one that helps make these comments. It just seems not appropriate, as Councillor Atkins says. I would say it seems wholly inappropriate. Maybe I should nominate somebody from my Conservative group who is looking on from a different angle. It just seems to me inappropriate that is a way forward with this.
Okay.
Councillor Dupre is chair of this committee normally, and is well known for being well across all the papers and everything within the purview of this committee. I think that the fact that she's sadly unable to be here today doesn't deplete from the fact that she would be an excellent person, especially as she's heard the debate. She would be an excellent person to help draw together the representation.
Aye.
I wouldn't dispute that Councillor Dupre would be an excellent person, but at the end of the day, she wasn't here to take part in the discussion, and as such, I strongly feel it should be somebody who was actually here.
Councillor Hassel.
I guess my observation is, I'm on here, so my observation, based upon the notes that have been, read back to us, is I think it's more about, this seems to me to be we're in pretty much agreement, it seems to be a wordsmithing exercise rather than anything else. And I don't think it really matters too much. I think Councillor Dupre, if she's best placed in order to write something that is more appropriate in conjunction with the chair, I don't see that it's a big thing that we should be really discussing. As long as we all see the submission at the end, I think we're making something bigger than it needs to be.
Councillor van der Weyden.
I would normally expect Councillor Dupre as chair to be involved in obviously she's not chairing this meeting, but she continues to be chair of the committee, to be involved in the finalisation of the response. I mean, if we want another Lib Dem involved, that's fine, but she would be involved anyway. I mean, so I think it's another one that could be involved too, but I'm not sure it'd add an awful lot.
Councillor Iqbal.
Right? Oh, sorry, I'm on. Thank you, and through you, Chair. Being on the committee and seeing her expertise and the way she handles the committee, I'm not saying that we don't and we don't know how to speak and to contribute. I think she will add value to our discussion, and I think we should get her on board. And that's my strong suggestion. As you said, I mean, that's not an issue that should be discussing. She's part of the committee anyway. Or rather, she's not here or she's here. It's irrelevant. I think she should be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Obviously, we're trying to get a consensus and draw it to a close. I wonder if Edwina has got any comments on this from a constitutional point of view.
From a constitutional point of view, Councillor Dupre remains the chair and should normally be involved in the responses. Yes, she's not attended today, but that doesn't diminish her role as the chair in coordinating responses on behalf of the committee. However, what I would say is that I believe that she would consult with all the members who've attended today to ensure that everyone's views are properly represented. I think the issue is more of the coordination, not necessarily verbalizing what was said. So if Councillor Dupre's role is coordinating as the chair appointed by the CA board, then she's able to do that constitutionally.
Sure, that's helped me. I think obviously to move it forward, I think what I would suggest is that Anne, if you could, draws up what we've picks up all the salient points that we've been through. I will then look at that and then send it round to all members and try to get a consensus from that. Is that? And that would I mean, as a member of the committee, Councillor Dupre would get a copy of that as well. I'm trying to move this forward, with, because I think broadly we're actually in agreement here. Councillor Atkins, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. My concern with that is just that time is short, and I think you'll get lots of responses back, and it'll be difficult. I would rather that a small group of councillors take a first look at it and then send it round in a view that's been seen by representatives from several parties. I don't quite understand why how the Liberal Democrat group is choosing to make sure that its views are represented has aroused such a strong pushback. If that is an obstacle, um, if that is a sufficient obstacle that you wish to that other groups wish to withdraw their consensus from what has been discussed today, then we can perhaps find an alternative arrangement. But it does seem to be a slightly unnecessary. When this is a cross-party group, which is going to have representative from each group anyway, I'm struggling to see the particular issue that we're facing here, with the suggestion that perhaps yourself, Councillor Dupre, and a representative of the Labour group take a first look and craft something that the three of you are happy with.
Councillor Count. Yeah.
It's clear that whilst some people agreed with me, there's not sufficient appetite, and the chair does have a position, as was stated. So if the Liberal Democrats want to appoint somebody who wasn't here to format their words and part of this to come to the end agreement, as long as that's circulated at the end. If I've got any comments on what's circulated, I'll make them same as everybody else would. But yeah, if that's the view of the committee, then yeah, happy to go ahead. Don't want this to extend any further. Thank you.
So I think we've got some progress now. So we will. We'll sort out the mechanics outside the meeting for Anne to obviously will send us round all of the myself and I don't. If Councillor Iqbal is going to be member of the Labour group, do you want to be the Labour representative on that? So we'll initially get that sent to yourself as well, and then obviously we'll send it round to all members. Time is short, as we know, because it's got to be in by Friday. So literally, if you do get it into your inbox, then please turn it round as quickly as you can with any comments that you've got. That being so, I think that we finally come to what has been quite a long meeting. And I'd like to thank everybody for attending today, and thank officers who've attended online, and obviously those members of the public and press who've been watching online. And thank you for your attendance. And the next, not to forget, there is the normal. This was an extraordinary meeting of the ONS committee. The normal monthly meeting is on 2 weeks yesterday, on the 23rd of January, on Monday the 23rd of January at Pathfinder House. Thank you.